Letecia? And we're with you. I said I would with you. You're on now. I said I would with you. I said I would with you. And I wouldn't use this.
Stop resisting.
I'm not resisting. I said I would with her.
Hi, my name is Madison, and you are listening to or watching Who's Knocking, a true crime podcast. Welcome. We are back with another episode in the Letecia and Stauch series. I think that this will be the second last of the series. It's a true deep dive. And this will be on the shorter end of length. This will be a somewhat shorter episode, maybe. But it packs a punch, I'll say. I do want to let everyone know, for the people who have been and continue to be around every week, I super appreciate your support and your comments and everything. It's awesome, and that's why we keep doing this, and we like to do it. But after this series, we are going to be doing a little bit of a facelift on this channel, and we've got some ideas for how to spruce it up a little bit, so it might require a little bit of a hiatus. So I do hope people stick around through that time. I might get into a bit more detail at a later date, but just know that that's coming, and I'm very excited for it. And I hope people are too. And if you like what you see, please subscribe. That would be dope, and it would be very helpful. So let's get into it. It's hard to believe that I am still talking about this one, but there is just so much here. I mean, if you think Letecia is a horrible, ridiculous person, just wait, because it gets so much worse. We left off last week after Letecia's arrest in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, her hometown, and she had an over 4-hour-long conversation, interrogation, what have you, with FBI agent Jonathan Grusing. Now, despite his skill and extensive experience, Grusing could not get Letecia to admit to any wrongdoing. It was a very stupid conversation, and it just displayed her extremely annoying personality yet again. Now, despite all of that, Letecia was still under arrest for murder, etc., and she was set to be expedited back to Colorado. Now, transporting a felon across state lines is a somewhat unusual occurrence, I'm sure, but well within the scope of regular police work. This is not something completely out of the ordinary. The decision was made that Detective Jessica Bethel, who we've met before, and another detective, Detective Riley, would rent a van and drive Letecia from South Carolina to Colorado. Now, on the way, they would also pick up a third person, and that was Deputy Michaela James. Now, the drive was due to last over 24 hours. I'm sure that the biggest worries on the minds of everybody involved was how annoying this experience would be. All of these detectives were privy to Letecia and had interacted with her, so they knew exactly how annoying and off-putting Letecia was as a person. I can only imagine that the thought of driving for over 24 hours with Letecia was something that none of them were looking forward to. But it turned out that her annoying personality was not all that they should have prepared for, and you'll see. So apparently the drive started out perfectly fine.
What was her demeanor like during that transportation?
She was calm. She ate. She sang songs. She played trivia.
Was she able to have conversations?
Yes.
Conversations that were not related to the investigation?
Yes.
Were they appropriate conversations, meaning if she's saying things, did they make sense?
Yes.
Was she able to eat and drink?
Yes.
Was she able to use the restroom?
Yes, she was.
And you mentioned trivia and singing songs. Was that something that all of you were sort of doing in the vehicle?
Yes, just to pass the time.
And was she participating in that in an appropriate way, meaning nothing seemed out of the ordinary?
That's correct, yes.
But this camaraderie did not last long. Here is exactly what happened when everybody involved dropped their guard. Now, just for context, this is Detective Bethel describing the video footage of what we will call the car incident.
You can see Letecia moving around slightly, and that's because her hands are handcuffed to a belly band around her waist, and she is manipulating her hands out of the handcuffs, and she obtains a Monster Energy can, and she strikes Deputy James in the face with that full unopened can of Monster Energy drink, and then struggles with Deputy James. I myself have noted several pre-contact cues where she is glancing at Deputy James' waist area where her gun was kept. And then ultimately, whenever I come back to assist Deputy James once the vehicle is stopped, she also glances at my waist where my gun is kept. I took that to be a threat that she was attempting to obtain one of our weapons. We immediately start giving commands to Letecia to stop. And as we're doing that, Deputy Riley pulled over to the shoulder of the interstate. Thankfully, there was an area clear for us to pull over, and he slammed on the brakes, which put her into the back seat of my seat.
Was that a highly dangerous situation that was unfolding?
Absolutely, yes.
What made it highly dangerous?
Miss Stauch was already suspected of murder, and she assaulted a deputy who was armed and attempted to obtain her firearm.
What about the fact that you're on the highway and that action or reaction by Detective Riley had to occur? Did that also enhance the dangerousness of it?
Yes, he wasn't able to exit the vehicle to immediately help us because of traffic that was traveling so quickly next to us.
See, Letecia is not just an annoying, horrible person, she's a violent person. And here is some of the aftermath of this incident.
Can you turn the air on?
Is my t-shirt?
Well, I asked for help for the air, and she's been nothing but mean to me the whole day. I can't breathe.
Stop.
I can't breathe. Just open it so I can breathe. That's all I'm asking for is to breathe. I'm just asking to breathe. That's it.
Stop trying to.
I'm not trying to resist.
Then stop turning.
To you. You're holding me for nothing.
Okay, stop trying to turn against
I'm
my
not
man.
trying to turn against you. You're holding me.
Go ahead and buckle her. We're gonna make sure she's not gonna get out of her restraints this time. I'm gonna see if they have a belly belt, a real one.
I'm pretty Marius.
This isn't gonna happen again.
Pretty Marius. I'm not doing anything. She's doing that. I'm not doing
Then
that.
stop turning against.
I'm not turning against you. You're doing that to me on purpose.
Good. We've got her in the.
See? Look what she's doing on purpose. Look.
Stop turning.
I'm not turning.
Stop moving.
I'm not moving.
Relax your body.
My body's relaxed.
What was she doing that was leading you to believe that she was trying to escape?
The fact that she had slipped her handcuffs, assaulted a deputy. Then later, she opened the back door of the van, which is why I returned to that position, led me to believe that she was trying to escape
How did she open the door?
with her foot.
Now, this is just craziness. Now, yes, obviously they should have restrained her better, of course, and I'm sure that they will not be making that mistake again. Detective Bethel was actually injured in this incident so badly that she ended up having to get surgery on her shoulder. And Letecia, where did you think you were going to go? What did you were hopping out of a moving vehicle? Like what? How did you think this was going to end? That that the hitting somebody with a Monster Energy drink would be enough to subdue 2 officers and you'd just run away? Like, that, this is ridiculous. Again, to all the people who say this is an intelligent woman, this is a doctor, like, please. So after they restrained her, they called for some backup. As you saw in the footage, she was very annoying throughout this entire ordeal. She tried to claim that she just wanted some air, that nobody would turn on the air conditioning or no one would roll down the window, and that's why she assaulted an officer and tried to escape. Now, they did end up finally getting Letecia back to Colorado so that she could be officially arrested there. And just to top it all off, it was on March 5th, 2020 that Al officially filed for divorce. So I'm sure, based on a lot of the conversations we heard between Letecia and Al on those phone recordings, I'm sure she was not particularly pleased about that. It was on March 11th of 2020 that Letecia was officially charged with first-degree murder in an El Paso courtroom. Letecia appeared in court and she looked meek and dirty and evil, quite frankly. She tried to hide her face from the camera, but now that she was a prisoner, there was nowhere to run and no place to hide, and she had to sit there in her lime green jumpsuit and just take it. And I'm sure she was not pleased with that either. Now, it was great that she had been captured and charged and locked up. That was obviously great, but there was still the big looming question because Gannon's body had still not been found. I'm sure Letecia was pretty happy about that and thought that she was very clever for having outsmarted all of law enforcement, including the FBI. But whatever stupid grin she wore on her stupid face in the privacy of her own prison cell, I'm sure that smile was swiftly wiped clean off of her face on March 17th, 2020, when Gannon's body was finally discovered. A couple of bridge inspectors with the Florida Department of Transportation were out and about doing their jobs, inspecting some bridges in Pensacola, Florida, like they do, and these poor innocent people stumbled across a large suitcase, a suitcase that we by now are very familiar with.
We got back to the suitcase, and where it was lying at kind of an odd angle, but the handle was towards the underside of the bridge. So I reached out for the handle and immediately noticed it was very, very heavy. And I looked back and remember telling Matt, I said, I don't know what's in this. I said, but it's heavy. I said, and where it was at, it had a possibility of being waterlogged. We didn't know whether it was clothing or something in it. We just noticed that whatever it was probably waterlogged and saturated, just due to how heavy it was.
And I imagine you get a lot of rain in Florida.
Yes, sir.
Do you get a lot of rain in the months of February and March?
We can. March normally is fairly rainy season, but again, where the suitcase was really right at the edge of the marsh, and depending on tide, you don't necessarily have to have a lot of rain for that area to be influenced by tide.
Okay. So you, Mr. Goins, get up to the suitcase. You said it appeared to be heavy. What happened after that?
Because of where it was at, it was very, very marshy and muddy. We, of course, didn't know what was in it, but underneath the bridge where it was at was very flat and sandy. And we kind of like made a decision, let's pull it out of the mud and pull it underneath the bridge where it was flat and sandy, and whatever it was in it, we'll just open it there rather than in the muddy marsh, just sticks and a lot of sticks and stuff there. So we pulled it underneath the bridge.
And what did you open it?
Yes, sir.
Tell us about that.
I was the first one to unzip it. And before we opened it, as soon as we unzipped it, we immediately noticed the smell. That's what hit us first. I remember looking up at Matt, who's quite a bit taller than me. And I said, Matt, I think there's something dead in here. And unfortunately, we do come across, sometimes somebody will throw out a litter of puppies or something in a bag, and that's not uncommon. And it smelled, but it was so strong. It was different that day. So I didn't initially open it, and we kind of thought about what we were going to do first. when we finally went ahead and unzipped the rest of it, the smell was so overpowering. We kind of took a step back. And the first thing I remember seeing was just 2 little feet and that had little football socks on them. The best I remember, I remember there being little socks on them. And before anything else happened, we couldn't really make out what it was. Matt dumped the suitcase over, and of course, we initially immediately knew it was a body. But after looking at it, it was we couldn't tell male or female, boy or girl. We didn't know. A lot of black hair. And then I turned away.
What was the size of this suitcase? Do you remember?
Roughly the size of a checked bag. It wouldn't have been it was too big to be a carry-on, but roughly the size of an older checked bag suitcase.
And was there anything else in the suitcase besides the body?
Lots of blankets. There may have been a pillow or something. I just remember a lot of bedding in there and blankets. It was kind of the body was in a fetal position and partially wrapped up, so we couldn't tell a whole lot until we dumped it out. And again, I turned my head,
What did you do after that?
walked away. I immediately said we went ahead and called the inspection right there. I didn't have my cell phone with me. Matt did at the time. He's a volunteer firefighter and he's dealt with some of this stuff, and I was very thankful to have him there. We immediately dialed 911 and got them on their way. And then I walked up back to the top of the bridge and talked to our truck operator and told him kind of what was going on, that they were shutting it down. And then just waited for authorities to get there.
Gannon's body had been wrapped up in a blanket and put inside of a suitcase and was left to decompose for over 5 weeks. He was completely unrecognizable and had to be identified through an autopsy. Now, the conclusions of the autopsy report were so extremely disturbing, and it made it very clear that this was no accident at all. Now, just for those who might be a little sensitive to this, I'm going to go over the autopsy right now, the autopsy report, and it's extremely disturbing. So if you don't want to hear about this, completely understandable, leave now. So Gannon had 18 sharp force injuries or stab wounds. He had several lacerations across his chest and also a very severe injury to the back of his head, which caused a deep gash and had fractured his skull. There was also a sharp force injury to his back so deep that it sliced into the space between his 5th and his 6th ribs, and he also had a fractured rib. Gannon also had multiple cuts on his hands and arms, indications that he had tried to defend himself against an active attacker. There were 2 bullets found in a pillow that was found in the bag with Gannon's body, and a 3rd bullet was found to have penetrated his jaw and spinal cord. So that's a lot of fucking injuries to a child. The toxicology report indicated that Gannon had both acetaminophen and hydrocodone in his system at the time of his death. Now, acetaminophen is Tylenol, and hydrocodone is an opiate-based painkiller. Obviously, not the type of drug that we're just handing out willy-nilly to a child, especially without the go-ahead from a medical professional. And just an additional note, there is a drug that, and I'm not sure if I'm going to talk about it, if the one I'm going to speak about in question was a mix, if he definitely had Tylenol and hydrocodone, because there is a drug that mixes the two. Not super relevant, but they can be put together in one drug. Al Stauch testified on the stand that he'd had a prescription for hydrocodone for a hand injury that he'd suffered shortly before Gannon's death, and the remainder of that prescription was in the home. He had not finished it. It was likely that that was the source of the hydrocodone found in Gannon's system. One thing that I will say about the toxicology one thing that I will say about the toxicology report is that because Gannon's body was in such an advanced state of decomposition, they were not able to tell exactly how much of either of these drugs were present at all. What is clear from the report is that Gannon suffered injuries from 3 weapons. There was a blunt force object, a knife, and a gun. This was overkill in every sense of the word, and judging by all of his defensive wounds, he was well aware of what exactly was going on in the last moments of his young life. Hearing the medical examiner go over Gannon's injuries was one of the most horrific parts of the trial and of this story in general. Any inkling of an idea that Letecia was not a literal monster sent to Earth from the depths of hell was gone. I believe that this was the only portion of the trial that Gannon's parents could not physically sit through, understandably. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself a little. Now, it was March of 2020 when Letecia was arrested, but it would be 3 years until she finally got to have her day in court. Many days, actually. Because instead of doing a decent thing, of admitting what she did and taking her punishment, because instead of doing the decent thing of admitting what she did and taking her punishment, instead of sparing Gannon's family the trauma of enduring a multi-week long trial and going into excruciating detail of Gannon's death and hours of footage of conversations that Letecia had with law enforcement and with Al, all of which were, as we heard, very cringy and uncomfortable to listen to. Instead of skipping all of that, Letecia decided instead to plead guilty by reason of insanity. And because she did that, we, the public, got to bear witness to one of the most ridiculous trials I've ever seen in my entire life. Next week, I will go over the important parts of Letecia's trial, focusing specifically on the mental health aspects and the debate about Letecia's sanity. This trial, again, I've said multiple times, I've watched it, and I've actually watched multiple parts of it multiple times to prepare for this series. This trial is more ridiculous than the Casey Anthony trial. It's more ridiculous than Jodi Arias' trial. And Letecia reminds me of those two because of the way that she tries to evade law enforcement, just the nature of her conversations with law enforcement and other witnesses, etc. But this one, it's like, on the one hand, you're like, okay, this is ridiculous that somebody is allowed to do this, that somebody is allowed to waste all these valuable resources and, just sit there and like just lie and lie and lie and like hire somebody to get up there and lie and lie. Like it's ridiculous. But on the other hand, that's part of a justice system. A justice system needs to give everybody their day in court. Everybody needs to be considered innocent until proven guilty. Otherwise, it's chaos. And so you have to remind yourself of that as you sit through this circus of a trial. But it's tough. It really does. I think it tests our capacity to believe in the system and to consider the system fair. But thank God, unlike certain other trials, Casey Anthony, I don't want to ruin it, but it did have a just outcome. But the fact that Gannon's family had to sit there through all of this is ridiculous. But at the same time, I don't know. I'd wonder what Gannon's family, like what their opinion would be about all of it, if they would have rather her just been locked up and not gotten to see this smackdown, essentially. Like, people really went hard on her, and obviously she deserved it. So I don't know. That'll be a big question that I'd love to get into next week. But yeah, this is definitely a shorter episode, but I think it got into all the deets of the drive home and the discovery of Gannon's body. And next week we will get into the trial, and there's a lot in the trial, but I'll try to condense it into what's really necessary. So super hope you enjoyed it. If you made it all the way to the end, awesome. And I will be back next week with the last of the series. And please stay safe out there because you never know who is knocking. This podcast is produced in collaboration with Lost Line Media. Artwork by August Digital. Music by Matthew